Right, okay, thanks very much. Any problems with posters, sign up, nervousness about your topic, anything like that? I'm not rushing off. Come and find me at the end, okay? And I shall, for subsequent lectures, I will always not be rushing off. We don't have formal tutorials on this module, but I'm never in a hurry at the end of the lecture. So please don't worry. If you've chosen health and safety and we haven't done it yet, whatever, just come and chat to me. And if you speak to previous years, they will reassure you that we're looking for a key message here. We're not looking for super technical. We're looking for a quirky, sometimes humorous spin on this issue. And I can help you with that. So please just, I don't know how it went out there. It's a bit of a scramble to start with. But hopefully you've all got interesting topics, and we'll chat about that as time goes on. So today we're talking about design management, which the RIBA Plan of Work is the thing which allows us to do that. And we'll say a little bit about life cycle costs. But so basically what we're going to cover is the whole business about how you actually design a building needs to be organised. And we've touched on that before in previous lectures, and I'm now going to just go into that structure for you, the RIBA Plan of Work. I'm going to just explain the black art that is costings, which is definitely not a precise art, and we'll say a little tiny bit about life cycle costs. But before I get into all that, what I'd like to do is introduce you to Alex Beadle. Alex is an important guy here in the university. When you get out in the big wide world and when you start your practice, and I, as you know, ran a practice for 25 years, and we worked for 5 of the local universities in the Northwest and North Wales, people like Alex become very important people, because I'm not saying he chooses the architects, but he's very much part of the process that chooses the architects and advises the user groups and the clients to try and understand the sort of bullshit that people are putting out and what is really meaningful and what is waffle. So sooner or later, if you stay working in Liverpool, Alex will be an important person. He also has to mastermind projects through their various work stages that we're going to talk to today. So he and his colleague Andy Murphy have been observing the process that we've been through with Marco, and he's very supportive of that, actually. He thinks engaging all the staff and students in the process is great. It's not been done before, and you never know, it may be a model for other schools. So he's been tracking that. That's just about to go live, and these architects are going to have to put in proposals, sketch schemes. Then there will be an assessment process, and it will be Alex that will be guiding the user group through that process. And then Alex will dip in and out as we work our way through the various work stages. So he has that sort of operational role too. But, just like me, he's only recently appeared here at the university. I think he appeared at a similar time, 3 years? Yeah. Similar time to me. Before that, his job was to front major project bids. So you will have read in the paper and on the telly that when, I don't know, Ipswich want a new hospital, and the hospital is going to cost 100 million, or even more than that, they go, I know, we'll ask 3 contractors to come up with ideas. And those 3 contractors are going to have design ideas, they're going to show how much it's going to cost, and then they have a sort of system where you pay for it on a sort of never. You're basically going to pay for it over the next 25 years, and they're going to tell you how much you're going to have to pay each year. So this is a massive thing, but you're in competition. And so Alex and his team would work for maybe 3 months. 3 months. And the dear old architect, his team would be working for that 3 months. It might be 1 or 2 people working for it, and even more for that period of time. And then they produce these beautiful glitzy drawings. You can imagine what they're like. And then somebody makes a decision. And all that work, if you've been the unlucky 2, is for nothing. And Alex was in charge of the teams that put those bids forward. So he has an interesting perspective because he's been both sort of gamekeeper and poacher, and now he's got a much more overview role here at university. So I'm going to ask him our questions, and of course you are welcome to ask him questions. I'm so grateful that he's spared the time to come. This is not a long lecture, and some of it you've already heard bits of before, so I'm not too nervous if we go a little bit longer than 15-20 minutes, if you're interested. So I'm going to start it off. So I'm going to ask him what it's like to be a client and how user-friendly are architects. And feel free to give an intro first, Alex.
Yeah, so what it's like to be a client. I think in terms of a lot of my time is taken up managing politics within this organisation, and that's simply because there are so many different personalities and characters to deal with at a senior level, and they can be quite animated in terms of what their desires and aims are, particularly when it comes to improving the environment, recognising the environment has a real strong place in terms of improving our position and our performance. What's it like to be a client? I keep going back to the question, is what we want to do be as an exemplar client. So when we're employing consultants, one of the primary, most important appointments we make on a project, and what we put a real lot of effort into, is the appointment of an architect now. I'm not saying that didn't used to happen, but we now have, we're developing a master plan. We've got an estate strategy and a master plan, and the master plan is hopefully going to shape the way we develop our estate for the next 20 years. Actually, it's designed for 10 years, but realistically it goes on for 20, mainly because of affordability. But we'll deal with the primary and the priority projects in the next 5-10 years. And when we're appointing an architect, what's it like to be a client? We want to be a good client, so we want to appoint an architect on fair and reasonable terms, not using onerous terms, try and appoint them on the basis of really the quality of their submission and the quality of their presentation and bid. I think we're on a journey as a client. The last interview that I went to was the appointment of an architect on a £22 million lecture centre that we're building. It was interesting to attend that interview. I deliberately got some high-level figures from the university in there, got the Executive Pro-Vice Chancellor of Education in there, and other EPBCs. And I kind of learned from that. You never stop learning, but I learned from that interview process, because what we'd asked for was the process that the architect saw us going through, and any ideas we got for design. It was quite interesting because we had 4 architects turn up, or I think 4 or 5, actually no, more than that, 5. It's really interesting. They each gave a completely different pitch. And I thought, actually, as an informed client, why on earth are we asking for process? We should know the RIBA plan of works. And one architect, who was actually a signature architect, world-renowned architect, wasn't there but was represented there, and turned up and talked for the first half hour about the process of the RIBA and how consultative their approach would be and how they'd work with us. And they didn't show us any images of the project that we were going to develop. And I thought, well, actually, is that them not interpreting what we wanted from the interview? Is that us as a client not actually telling them or advising them what we wanted from the interview? And to be frankly, it's probably a bit of both. And then what's it like to be a client? Then we went through meeting some of the other architects that came in, and they had basically half an hour to pitch. And bear in mind, we've gone from a short list of 30 architects down to 20, and we're actually interviewing about 5 or 6. And the one that really won the project came in and blew us away. Didn't talk about process, and just came in and talked about, led us up to the surrounding area that the project sat in, real thought and consideration about the architectural heritage of the university, recognised the fact that we really wanted a symbolic building, although we had a limited budget, we wanted something really special, and recognised the floor area and how that would work, and the impact on cost and working with us, but then led us down to this absolutely wonderful design. We thought it was a wonderful design, the design's subjective, and came in with a model of it, and then came in with the imagery of it. And were very articulate in terms of leading us through the journey of the design process, that they didn't go straight into this is the wow image, but led us up to that, a very thematic presentation. I think some of the other architects that came in, they kind of missed the way because they didn't consider the adjacencies. They were very functional designs, but they just didn't have that wow factor. And I wish I could explain to you what the wow factor was, but I'm not able to do that because it's different with every project. So what's it like to be a client? Well, I think we're trying to be an exemplar client. We're trying to improve the way we appoint architects, and we recognise architects are the most important appointment in the specialist field that we work in. What we are trying to do is make sure that our scoring criteria reflects that. We're trying to be as fair and reasonable as we possibly can. Having worked on bids, Peter and I have talked about this, when I was a bid manager, I worked in the private sector for about 4 or 5 years. My job was bid management. I bid 11 jobs and I won 4 with the team. It was very much a team effort, it wasn't just me. When you win a job, you're absolutely elated. You put your heart and soul in it. You've worked 24 hours sometimes, and it's in fact one of the most wonderful feelings that you'll ever get in your life. When you lose a job, it's crushing. Absolutely crushing. It can take you weeks, if not months, to recover from that. So just be prepared for that, would I advise you. So I don't know if that gives you a bit.
That does, and I was saying to Alex, as a firm, we've often, well, I can think of half a dozen times when we've pitched for major bits of work. You know, to us, 4 million, 6 million is a big job. And when we've been unsuccessful, I've been all grumpy and want to write a letter complaining, and it's all a stitch up, and my business partner is very much of the opinion that it's that sort of thing that kills you, and you just need to chill, just take stock, there'll be a new opportunity. And my goodness, many times we've been invited back to the same institutions where we were unsuccessful because they liked what we did, even though we didn't happen to win that particular job, and also we were very professional about the way we gracefully accepted we hadn't won. Okay, the next question, and bear in mind this is the sort of question that comes up in your multiple choice exam, so we'll have to be interested to see what Alex says. So we sort of, a lot of these lectures are about what you are responsible for as an architect. But one of the questions in past multiple choice questions is, what is the client principally responsible for on a project that no one else can be responsible for?
That's an interesting question. I'd always start off with how we develop schemes and how informed we are with the client. I think when you go into a project, you'll see various different guises of client. There'll be the well-informed client, the articulated client, there'll be the client who hasn't got a clue. They're out there. What we're trying to do is be as well-informed before we make that architect's appointment as possible. And going back to the first question, when I said about managing the politics and corralling quite strong opinions sometimes, and although there might be a leader in an organisation, it depends how they lead and how democratic or autocratic they are, and actually knowing where the cheese is, where the power is, and who are the right stakeholders. So what we're trying to do now is get that absolute brief nailed from the start before we even engage an architect. Actually organise ourselves so we actually are not so we're actually well positioned in terms of what our brief is and what our requirements are. Because 9 times out of 10 when you're developing a project, it isn't a cut and paste exercise. We are going into a new generation of learning and teaching and research. The spaces need to be agile, flexible. You look at some of the immersive learning that's going on now. You look at how the competition has raised the bar. I mean, for example, we're looking at potentially a fantastic new health facility, which would be totally transformational for this university, with simulation facilities, mock-up hospital facilities inside it. It's a completely different way of learning, that's really what we want to do. We want to challenge the teams and think about what the scope is before we engage the design team, so we maximise the input from the design team and they've got a real good thorough brief. I think if we don't do that, then we're not doing ourselves justice and we're not doing the project justice. And actually it's informed the stakeholders. You can't believe how naive a stakeholder can be, a key stakeholder, that they won't know about the RIBA process, they won't know about what their input is required in terms of decision making and time. Some might not, but my experience is here is we need to carefully guide people through the process and have a project sponsor. Actually now we actually insist when we're doing a project that we have an in-house project sponsor from the faculty or the school or the institute who is that kind of lead person who can corral all those different swirl of people and opinions that are involved in a project. And the output of that is that we get a more robust brief together. We're actually going to market to engage an architect. We could go straight to an architect and engage them, but I think what we want to do is, rather than do that at the moment, some schemes we do that on the smaller schemes, but on the anything from £5 million plus, then we look to get a bit more of an informed sort of view of where we're at.
That's great. I think implicit in brief is budget. The client sets the budget, only the client, and then having set the budget, the client takes the risk. So Alex get his backside kicked if projects go over budget or they go over time, good style. That's what people in Alex's position worry about. If a set of lecture rooms are not available for September, then the Vice-Chancellor almost certainly comes down on Alex saying, well, what you've been doing, that's why I employ you, blah, blah, blah. There's no use he can try and blame the architect, but at the end of the day, the risk is with the client, and that's why they try and... Is there anything else you want to say?
One thing I'd like to say is when I joined the university, I joined from the NHS. I was in the private sector for about 28 years. Then I worked for the NHS as head of estates at Manchester Royal for 5 years before I came to the University of Liverpool. What it did bring to the University of Liverpool was a more robust technique for business case. And it's interesting when you get your brief, because actually that can tell you what the client's like. When we issue a brief, we like to think we issue a pretty robust brief, and it's what I brought into the University of Liverpool was that kind of robustness to business case management. So we now use what's called the 5-case business case management. Worth you looking that up actually on the web. 5-case business case management. The reason I say that is because I actually got asked that at an interview about 15 years ago with an architect, and we didn't know what it was, and it counted strongly against us, and they use it a lot in the NHS. It's seen as a really good way of preparing a business case, and the design process and the cost process links into that. What we've tried to do to set our budgets is we've done an estate strategy that was very consultative. We consulted with over 130 stakeholders. It was done by a strategist rather than a designer. Very one-dimensional piece of work, but won a lot of favour and hearts and minds within this institution because it really was so consultative and it produced real evidence base for what we thought our investment programme should be for the next 20 years. From that, we've employed a firm called Field, Clegg and Bradley Studios. They went through a tender process to develop our master plan, which will have really strong visual content, which we're going to go public with a big PR exercise middle of this year, which will strapline will be £800 million investment in the University of Liverpool estate. And what we've done is we've plot tested and validated each and every scheme that we've got from the estate strategy and kind of put some visual reality to it. And what was quite clever, I was really impressed with Field and Clegg Bradley Studios. They kind of understood the heritage and character. What we didn't want to do is give a brief to an architect and say, go forth and build me a new electronics building, here's £50 million. We want to say, right, here's the informed view of what the area should be, what the contents should be, the schedule of accommodation, but also what the budget is against what had been plot tested by Field and Clegg, and we knew it could fit on that site. And Field and Clegg have kind of thought about the look and feel of buildings. We don't want to be too prescriptive to an architect in terms of the look and feel of a building. We want them to have their own initiative and come up with their own imaginative design. But actually we do want them to think about the look and feel of the building and its co-adjacency, recognising we've got a lot of heritage stock. And what was particularly brilliant about what Field and Clegg have done is they have done an exemplar document which you would see when the master plan's issued, that English heritage is really appreciated, so much so that they're recommending that for an exemplar across other institutions, because we're in a very similar position that a lot of other big institutional environments are in. We've got a lot of 1950s, 60s building stock. We've got 500,000 square metres of estate, one of the biggest estates in the country. But over half of that was built in the 1950s, 60s and 70s, which was architecture of its era, but is now at the end of its natural design life. And what English Heritage were particularly concerned about was not the 19th century building stock, because most of that's listed anyway, it's red brick. It's the 20th century building stock and the loss of that architecture from that era. And what I feel that Clegg are able to do is articulate the thought processes behind what we keep and what we don't keep and what we adapt. I thought that was quite clever the way they've done that, because they considered the architect, they considered the look, the recesses, the facades, the construction of the building, and how it fits with the rest of the estate. So when we're developing estates and we're giving briefs out, we're very cognizant of the fact that we give the master plan out, and that's actually a guiding principle, and give some guiding thoughts and principles to an architect to say, actually we really want you to think about this when you're developing your design. It was interesting, I could just talk about the Digital Innovation Facility, which is a relatively small one of our projects. It's a £12 million project. We've had 3 architects on that, not for any particular reason, it's just because we had to comply with various procurement routes. The first architect was off our was just appointed because we had a connection. But it's interesting their first thoughts on the design and came up with this design. But really, the planners were highly critical of it, and you could understand why, because it really didn't take into account its adjacency, the fact it was facing one of the most famous architects of its era, Alfred Waterhouse building. It didn't reflect the character of that building in a contemporary setting. The kind of second architect that was involved, actually no, there was only 2 architects. The second architect was involved did begin to take that into account, the shape, size and form of the building, and respectful of the heritage. And it's kind of that famous saying, like being guardians of the past and innovation in the future. Recognising we've got an architectural zoo as an estate, so many different forms. But even then, I feel that Clegg Bradley had a look at their design. They were able to inform their design a bit more and have more consideration. And had we had Phil and Clegg on earlier, we might have been able to preserve a bit more of our existing building stock, because we might put a bit better thought into it. Because you can't, even though we've been in the industry a long time, when you get another set of eyes on it, and especially with the way I feel that Clegg have worked, it's been absolutely wonderful to see how they've really thought about the preservation of the estate, but recognising that we need to build contemporary, innovative buildings.
Okay, so Alex has been quite complimentary about architects, their strengths, and how they can make a big difference to the team, and sometimes judgments are made very much on the creative side of things. But having had a long, and of course Alex isn't an architect, having had a long association with them, can you think of any criticisms or things where they can fall short?
I think I've seen architects go to pieces in interviews. I think it's recognising that interviews are quite a brutal affair. Whenever I've done a bid interview, bar none, it's usually been us and them, the client on one side of the table and the presenting panel on the other, and it's having the character, the personality. I've seen architects go in and absolutely blow character. I worked on a large mental health facility. The architect that was involved in that clearly had studied mental health to the 8th degree, to the fact that actually on one of the jobs actually stayed over in a mental health unit and really understood the psychology that was required for mental health. They were highly specialist in their field. They just blew the client away, and they won the job for us. I've been in other interviews where architects think they're prepared for it, but they just go to pieces, and the pressure that's on them at that time, and it can be really difficult. And I have a sympathy for it, because it is a very much an us and them scenario that you're in. I suppose the other elements are making sure that you listen, and that you do take notes. I think if you're not taking notes and you're not appearing to listen, then that can sometimes frustrate people. I think also the the flow of information is vital and reputation is vital. We've had architects on here that are chasing us for work, but because of their current performance on here, we're not even putting them on a tender list, and we won't consider them. Or you put them on a tender list, but you're doing it out of sake, and really there isn't the heart really to employ them because of the performance. We usually find there's the architects that can do the concept, that can win the job for you, but as important as that is the architects that actually design the job and do the nuts and bolts and perform. So it's really been able to have that all-round kind of feel for it.
Okay, so and of course, although I don't teach in MBA at the moment, I certainly have done, and we're forever saying that your reviews are an opportunity to practice in a relatively safe environment. You might think it's not that safe in a crit, but trust me, compared to the brutal world out there, it certainly is. And this ability to be able to communicate and to present, and you might be presenting to Alex, or if you're working for Foster's, you'll be presenting within the office work that you've done to the internal design panel, is a really important skill. So that's why we keep harping on about the importance of preparing, having a beginning and a middle and an end. Okay, so the last question, Alex, rather boring question, probably for the assembly here, but certainly not a boring question for you. And it's really difficult for BA students to get their head around this, is how important money is when you're producing a building.
Yeah, so that's sometimes a difficult one to answer, because obviously you want the most symbolic building, you want the best specifications. What we try to introduce now is a two-stage process, so that we allow for the marrying of the cost with the design, and that actually this wasn't happening before I arrived, and it does happen a lot out there in the general industry now, that two-stage process is more prevalent, that allows for the marrying of design. So we have a first stage that allows for the engagement of a contractor to work along the design team to price the project, and so that the design is married in with the price, and that we avoid shocks down the line before we actually get to contract stage and the second stage of actually building it. There are lots of tensions along that way, because there's a tension from the architect that they want the best possible building, they want their design, and then there's a reality of the cost checks that go along with that to say, well, actually we need to compromise on this, we need to compromise on that, and we're currently going through that on the job that I just mentioned now, the lecture hub, but for all the right reasons, because it's not so much that the contractor is being awful in terms of the pricing, a lot can happen, but it's more a case of using common sense and levity to try and get to a position where the costs and the design do marry with each other. We have tried to set the budgets that we've got in a real way, so that we have this master plan, we have thought about the area, we have thought about the context of the building, and then we've applied a square metre rate to it, or an initial cost plan before we engage and go through that process. You can guarantee, bar none, everybody in this room will come across a cost and affordability issue at some point, possibly on every single project you work on, and it's how you work as a team to overcome that. And it is teamwork to overcome that.
The point being that, like with our own architecture school, a lot of this is not in the public domain, but a certain amount of money has been apportioned to build our extension, and that's right from the very, very top, from the top echelon of the university. That figure is the figure. That figure cannot be exceeded. So what Alex does is he builds in a buffer. So he realises that things are going to change and things will be developed. He can build in a certain amount of buffer, but that is it. And it's really important out there in real life that 90% of the time, the budget is the budget. The only frustrating thing is just 10% of the time, particularly when you're pitching for work, we have lost work in the past because we religiously stuck to the budget. And then some smart ass has come along and done this extraordinary scheme. I could show you one at the front of John Moores now. 1.5 times the budget, and the Vice Chancellor says, love that, we'll have that.
Yeah, that can be really frustrating.
Anyway, so I'd really like to thank you, Alex. Thank you very much indeed. Is there any questions before he goes? Okay, well, thank you very much indeed.